What the most interesting thing happened after the Oscar was over, there was nobody to guide you as to where to go, where to find the parking, etc. Because, it's like once the film has ended, they take you out for the Patli Gali, So I blundered, left and right and found myself in Jennifer Aniston's makeup room. Entirely by mistake. And I was in my black bangala, and the only thing I had with me was my copy of Slumdog Millionaire. And she looked at me and she looked at the copy in my hands and she says, "So you are the man?" And I said, "Yes, I am the man."
The man behind 8 Oscars.
So imagine, I'm an Indian diplomat and I was just going to check on the Indian community in Asmara. I didn't have more than $10 or $15 in my pocket. And now I've been asked to hire a plane from anywhere in Djibouti, take it to Asmara and rescue the Indians there. So that involved negotiating with a bunch of Somalian pirates who ran a very dodgy airline with Russian pilots and Antonovs and Tupolev aircraft, and they demanded $250,000 to be paid to them on the tarmac and things like that. I mean, there's lots of stuff which I cannot reveal officially, but all I can say is it had all the elements of a Tom Clancy thriller. If at the school level itself, we teach children, what is right and what is wrong, how to spot fake information, I think it will stand them in very good stead, because as you rightly said, the horse is already bolted. Children at a very young age are now exposed to social media, exposed to all kinds of information, and they do not know what to believe and what not to believe. So if the schools can equip them with the tools that they need to separate fact from fiction, to separate the signal from the noise, as it were, I think that will be a huge service to all of us, because they will grow up as responsible adults. We all know how popular Kaun Banega Crorepati became in India. At 9 p.m, when Amitabh Bachchan appeared on that show, which you produced, people would refuse to answer the door because they were busy watching the questions on the quiz show. So that was for me the inspiration to craft a story based around a quiz show, because what I wanted to show through that novel was no experience is ever lost, that the greatest teacher in the world is life itself.
Welcome to Quizzitok. Quiz and talk. Quiz, just asking questions and listening to answers. And talk, general talk, Quizzitok. Today we have a very special guest, an acclaimed author and former diplomat whose storytelling has captured hearts across the world. His debut novel, the very first he wrote, Q&A, was adapted into Slumdog Millionaire, a film that won multiple Oscars, 8 Oscars. And his latest book, The Girl with 7 Lives, takes readers on a very exciting journey through modern India. Please welcome Vikas Swarup. Welcome, Vikas. Great to have you with us on Quizzitok.
Thank you so much, Siddhartha, for having me on this brilliant show.
It's a pleasure. Vikas, you've been a diplomat, a celebrated author, and a cultural ambassador for India. We're excited to hear about your journey, and I know our listeners, especially young people, students, and teachers tuning in, and the general public, they are in for a real treat. Let's start with your latest book, The Girl with 7 Lives. In a nutshell, what's it about?
So it's about a 25-year-old woman called Devi and her extraordinary journey, documenting how she first lived in a slum on the outskirts of Delhi, and from there her journey takes her to Punjab. From there she goes off to Kerala. From there she comes to Goa and eventually ends up in Mumbai, where she has been kidnapped and is being held hostage by a masked gunman who's threatening to shoot her dead unless she reveals her entire life story to him and confesses to all the crimes that he's accusing her of. To add to her terror, her life is being set up for an online auction where the highest bidder will determine her fate.
So life on auction. Wow.
Life on
And it
auction.
begins from what age?
So basically it begins from the age of 2 or 3 when she first arrives in Delhi with her parents, and then goes on till the age of 25. So it's a coming of age story as well.
A Bildungsroman, what the
Yes,
Germans would call
but
it,
also
in manner of speaking, but told in this very interesting unfolding of the narrative.
Correct. So I call it Arabian Nights meets Slumdog Millionaire, because it traverses the world of Slumdog in the sense it's the story about the underclass, and it also revealed over the course of just one night, and every night, every question, every segment ends on a cliffhanger.
Your storytelling skills are fantastic. Really very interesting. And, everybody who knows Q&A and your other books, Six Suspects, I think, and
The Accidental Apprentice.
Accidental Apprentice, all of that. It's very interesting also your empathy and understanding of other worlds in today's modern India, including your latest novel, the conversance with various things that are happening, that currency is quite, in a sense, far removed from your world of diplomacy and also your own life and upbringing. So how do you manage that degree of understanding and empathy?
I think you have hit the right note by using the word empathy. That's the difference between sympathy and empathy. In sympathy, you are in your own shoes, you are just sympathizing with somebody else's predicament. You take pity on them. But when you have empathy, you actually become them and you start looking at the world from their eyes. And that's really what I try to do when I write about people and circumstances and situations and cities that I do not have personal knowledge of. I, try to get under the skin of my characters through the quality of empathy. And of course, then I do a hell of a lot of research. Research is very important to create an authentic backdrop against which your characters are, going about their daily lives.
Authenticity, but there's also a certain realism and a currency and a sensitivity to various things which are going on around us, and in a way that a lot of trained diplomats would not speak about. Sort of in your work you do creatively, that's a different space. So even bureaucrats are normally very cautious about what they state, what they don't say. They won't talk about undercurrents, underworld, all of that you don't speak about, but you managed it and you pulled it off in your books.
So yes, as somebody has said, that there is nothing diplomatic about my books,
Yeah.
even though I was a diplomat for 35 years.
Right.
But then the great thing is, the government of India actually allows you that freedom, that creative liberty.
That is
Civil
exceptional.
services rules are framed in such a way that you don't even need government's permission to publish a literary novel. I think that's the great thing,
Did you ever have pushback?
No, in fact, I never had to even submit my books. I just had to give a certificate saying that there is nothing in these books which will damage relations with another country, because as a foreign service officer, the last thing the government wants is for me to write a book which, damages a bilateral relationship with a friendly country.
I can imagine that, and we'll come later to the film that was made out of Q&A. But at the moment, we were talking about one in the Q&A, which became Slumdog Millionaire, the young man at the center of it, the main protagonist. Ram Muhammad Thomas was the name in the book. Jamal Malik, I think, in the film. And in this Girl with Seven Lives, Devi, they grew up in different circumstances. They were the underdogs, slumdog, if you like, and slum girl, if you like, or your life. Tell us about it. What was your early experience like? What was your learning experience like? What were the influences? You were born in Allahabad, now called Prayagraj.
Yes, I was born in Prayagraj, and I grew up in a legal family, that everybody in my family was a lawyer. Okay. My father was a lawyer, my mother was a lawyer, my grandfather even rose to become the Solicitor General of India. So I grew up with a lot of legalese around the house. But the great thing was, my grandfather was a man of eclectic tastes. So apart from having, of course, all the legal tomes in his library, he also had interest in art, in architecture, in philosophy, in culture in general, and in literature.
His name?
His name was Jagdish Swarup.
Okay.
And he's regarded as a great legal luminary. He's written a number of books. One book in particular called Legislation and Interpretation is still seen as a definitive handbook for lawyers. So it was in his library, which had 10,000 books, that I found a lot of books that I could lay my hands upon. For instance, Will Durant's Story of Philosophy. The first time I read it was from his library. And right next to it would be Albert Camus' The Stranger. So that is how, a love of reading got formed in my mind.
And very early. What
At a very
age are we
early
talking
age,
about?
I think I was 5 or 6 years old when I started really reading even heavy-duty books. And I read each and everything that I could lay my hands upon. Because you see, one of the advantages of growing up in the pre-PlayStation, pre-Netflix, pre-cable TV era is that you could either watch a film once or twice a month, or you could read books. There was nothing really else to spend your time on. And I really read books. And it was that early love of reading and early love of books that really inculcated in me a desire to see the world. Like when I read Enid Blyton, and they're talking about a scone. I had never seen a scone in my life. there was a sense of curiosity. What is a scone? How does it taste?
Yeah,
like?
all the treats that they would have,
Exactly.
famous five.
The famous five or the secret seven.
Yes,
you know,
that's
or,
right. That's right.
Absolutely. So I think it was that early exposure to international cultures that encouraged me to join the Foreign Service as a career.
So the library and the reading habit, which started very early and was encouraged, and of course the mentoring figures in the family made a difference to you. I'm sure school too. Which school did you go to?
So I went to the premier school in Allahabad at that time. It was called Boys High School. And there's always a rivalry between the Boys High School and St. Joseph's Convent, which is the other premier school in Allahabad. And of course, BHS people always think of BHS as superior. And let's not forget, Amitabh Bachchan also went to BHS.
Is that right? Okay, so there's a connection.
Yes.
Because Q&A to quite a degree was inspired by Convener Crorepati.
Oh, absolutely. That was for me the biggest inspiration when I was crafting this story, because we all know how popular Kaun Banega Crorepati became in India. I'm told that at 9 p.m. when Amitabh Bachchan appeared on that show, which you produced,
Yeah.
people used to become antisocial. People would refuse to answer the door because they were busy watching the questions on the quiz show. So that was for me the inspiration to craft a story based around a quiz show, but with a very untypical contestant. Because what I wanted to show through that novel was that the greatest teacher in the world is life itself. And those of us who have graduated from the school of hard knocks, they know that, nothing in life, no experience is ever lost. And it can hold the key not just to the questions on a quiz show, but to life itself.
That is one of the most remarkable things I found about it. In the book Q&A, you call the game How to Win a Billion? Or
No, it's called Who Will Win a Billion, W3B. Because you see,
Oh, okay.
I
W-
treat them as a group of cheats. So I could not use Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Those people would have sued me. So they are offering 100 crores as prize money,
which they don't want to give away.
which of course they don't want to give it. They don't even have 100 crores. So their idea is to tempt and titillate you with the promise of 100 crores, but ensure that nobody wins it. So let's say if Siddhartha Basu you were to apply on that show, they would say, sorry, our computer is not picking you up for some reason. But when this 18-year-old waiter called Ram Muhammad Thomas applies on that to appear on the show, they say, oh, he's a waiter. How far can he go? Let's call him. And he appears and he answers all 13 questions and he wins 100 crores. And that's when the problem starts.
Because they want to frame him.
Because they have no money to give him and they cannot believe that an 18-year-old waiter could know which is the smallest planet in the solar system or the plays of Shakespeare and things like that. So obviously they come to the only conclusion they could have come to: he must have cheated. So when the novel opens, you have Ram Muhammad Thomas being locked up in a jail and being tortured by a police inspector and being forced to reveal, how he knew what he knew.
It's very interesting how you wove in different life experiences and circumstances where he picks up from observation and knits things together and connects them so that he can give the answers, and very varied ones.
Yes,
The
exactly.
kind of exposures that he has, whether it is in an orphanage or whether it is out on the streets, or whether a sort of how should I say, organized beggary and blinding, or at various points, or working in a diplomat's house.
Yes.
You made that connection. It's very interesting how you do that and put it all out together. You mentioned how the book was premised on people not want to give away the money, which is in sharp contrast to Convener Crorepati, with which I've been associated for 21 years. And I know they've given a couple of 100 crores, as a matter of fact, as prize money. And not many people know, I don't think even you knew till a little chat a while back, that we also played a part in the making of the movie.
Yes, I did not know that. I believe you are the one who coached, in fact, Anil Kapoor as the quiz master, and you are the one who showcased that entire quiz show format.
Yes, we set up the whole studio. It was at ND Studios at Karjat, where with the camera and the setup and everything, and Danny Boyle and his team worked there. And yes, we did.
That's why it felt so authentic, because you were behind it.
No, it had to do with the team and invest. But what I was coming to was, when I first read the screenplay, I had misgivings, because several things. A, it departed from the book in ways that I thought some of the wonderful things in the book, those nuances would have been lost, I guess, to an international audience in the book. That name that you thought of, Ram Muhammad Thomas, has a little consonance with the name that Udham Singh gave when he was grabbed after the assassination of Michael Dwyer, and he gave it as Ram Muhammad Singh Azad.
Absolutely, that was one of the inspirations.
And it became Jamal Malik. which means something else within the country. And some of the things, emerging from a vat of human excreta and things like that. I was wondering.
That was
But
not in the book at all.
I know it wasn't in the
Exactly.
book, and I was wondering, I was not comfortable at all. But the people who asked us to do it, to help with putting the show together so that Danny Boyle could shoot, were the licensors and the originators of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, mainly Paul Smith of Celadon.
Correct.
But as I said, Paul Smith and the team wanted us to do it and had led to the screenplay. And as I guess as a screenplay, it must have worked. It wouldn't have won 8 Oscars, including one for the one who wrote the screenplay,
Correct.
and have done so well because it connected in other ways. And I think it was a story of the underdog, particularly after the global meltdown.
Exactly. You see, this was the right film for the right time. It came in 2008 when, because of the Lehman shock, people were losing hope, people were losing jobs. And they wanted something that could inspire them. And comes along this $15 million low-budget film, which was marketed as the feel-good film of the decade, an underdog's tale. And that's really what inspired people, because they said, look, I have $5,000 and I'm feeling miserable. This guy has nothing. And yet, he has an optimistic attitude on life.
Yeah, which is fantastic. And that story, that empathy, as a matter of fact, perhaps it was intrinsic, but that story of the human life behind the person on the hot seat, through a knowledge game, changing his or her life, that became the fulcrum of the subsequent success of the show globally.
Yeah.
Because
I
globally,
like that.
including the United States, it changed to the story of the person sitting there, the human story.
Right.
It ran on emotional tires. And when KBC made a comeback after a hiatus, as it were, in 2010, throughout the world, the licensors also said, it's very important how you pick the people who are in the middle.
So people are interested in the backstory of the guy sitting on the hot seat.
Yes. Well, there are a number of criteria, I think but that became a very key one. So there always had to be a balance. I, as a sort of a general knowledge evangelist, would say, look, knowledgeability is the first criteria. And as long as I was there, I ensured that was there. But there was also a lot of pressure from the audition to say, no, the human story. There are other factors, on KBC, which is one is that we had made sure from the very first season that at least 50% will be women. Because quizzing
That's interesting.
typically has not been.
Yes, you're right. It's seen as a male forte.
Absolutely. So it didn't have so many women. So 50% was there. Second was representation from different parts of the country, different sort of livelihoods, different careers, different age groups. All of them had to be factored into the game. So that was there. Articulation was very important. So the person be there. And then finally, of course, the backstory and something that we call the X factor.
Yes.
If somebody has something which differentiates it. So then it came down to the human story through a knowledge game, and also for the prime appeal of the show was to see a life change in front of your eyes
overnight,
in the duration of a
instantly,
show, or over a couple of shows, as it were.
Absolutely.
And you caught the essence of that early. I want to ask, how did the idea originate, and what was the writing process like that? How did that happen?
So you see, I was a quizzer myself, and that's why
Is that right?
Yes, in my school days, in my college days, I was a very avid quizzer. I used to represent my school at inter-college quizzes, for instance.
Wow.
Even at the university level, I participated in some quizzes. So I was always a quizzer. And to me, it felt like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire changed the whole format of the quiz show. Because a quiz show, when I was growing up, was all about your knowledge. Do you know the answer to the question that you are asked? If you don't know, can you guess that answer? But Who Wants to Be a Millionaire changed that. In fact, the producers of the game show have themselves told me, they say, our show was not about knowledge. It was about, do you know the value of money?
Yeah.
So that when you are sitting at, 500,000 rupees and you are asked a question and you have given the choice that you can take your money and you can go, or you can choose to answer the question, and you answer wrongly, what do people say? Oh, what an idiot. He should have taken the money and gone. He shouldn't have tried to answer the question when he was not sure. So I thought that was a very, a commercial way of looking at this interaction that we have with our brain when we are sitting in a quiz show.
I'll just put a little bit of a rider on that. There was conversation the first time we went with Mr. Bachchan to London. He said he wanted to see it for himself before deciding whether he wanted to do it or not.
So you went to the Chris Tarrant show.
Yeah, Chris Sand was recording it. So
Correct.
we went to Shepherd's Bush, so we were recording and we went it together. And there was sort of animated conversation among the star people who were then producing it. And I was part of it. And, what should they, put the value of the prize at,
Right.
And that conversation was settled later. That's another story altogether. But they were discussing it where Paul Smith, who originated Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, originally as Quiz Mountain,
Right.
said, it's not the money, it's the drama.
Right.
It's the drama of dilemma.
Yes, but the drama comes from the huge amounts of money that you're throwing at.
Yeah, that's a stake.
Exactly. That's
And
the
so you
stake.
have to know the value of money. So you're absolutely right. And they were right in telling you that it's about the value. But you need to do the value of money, which is why, at least initially, when they introduced the junior KBC for the first season, I said, for kids,
Yes,
money means nothing.
Exactly.
Because in the sense of, when we played it as a mock also, so what would you do with a sum of money? Somebody said with, I think, a lakh of rupees when they got there, whatever it is, 1,60,000 was that level. Question 10, they said, what do you do? He said, I'll buy footballs. So you buy football? How many footballs? How many do they know? Without the value of that, it's like a kid stepping out and hitting every ball for a sixer.
Yes.
Because they don't know the value of getting out the wickets,
Correct.
winning and losing. So it is about the value of money, but it's also about
The drama associated.
the drama of
I agree
dilemma.
badly.
And for me, always the importance was the integrity came from the fact that it was a knowledge show and you told it through a knowledge show.
Correct. So for me,
Back to you about writing a book.
so the challenge really was, okay, I have decided to set my story around a quiz show, but then I have to follow the conventions of a quiz show.
Yes.
Because, being a quizzer myself, I know what are the conventions. The same question cannot be repeated. If you have asked country and capitals, the next question has to be on a different topic altogether. And more importantly, the questions have to become progressively harder as you, ascend up the level.
Yes.
So I had to ensure an organic connection between the stories and the questions that would flow from those stories.
Totally.
And that was the challenging part. On the surface, the book looks very easy. It's a very easy read, but actually a lot of, effort went into constructing the scaffolding on which to place this.
No, that device of, telling the story through the...
Correct.
In a sense, it's what's made Millionaire, the show, work across the world.
Exactly.
And
And early
30 countries.
And I had another ace up my sleeve. I told the story first. And then the question comes after. So when you have read the story, you are trying to yourself figure out what's the question going to come from this story.
So you're peeling layer after layer.
Exactly. So you are playing detective as well. Whereas if I had put the question first and then the story, the moment you come to that part in the story where this is how he got the answer, you have no more interest in that story. But the most amazing thing, Siddhartha, is I wrote this book in 2.5 months.
I was going to come to that. And while you were
And
serving as a diplomat.
And while I was serving as a diplomat, so Monday to Friday, the second Gulf War was going on. I would basically do my reporting and whatever.
Where were you?
In London.
Okay.
I was posted in London as a diplomat, as a political counselor in London. My family had gone back to India because the school session had already started in India, and I was due to be posted back to Delhi.
Okay.
But Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee had decided to visit London, and so I was detained in the sense that finish this visit and only then you can go back.
Right.
So I had about 2 months, between the departure of my family and the arrival of the Prime Minister. And it was in those 2 months that I thought about this idea, wrote about this idea, and, found an agent, and the rest, as they say, is history.
You wrote it in 2 months flat.
2 months flat.
It's remarkable.
Yeah,
but
I
I
think-
think must have clicked together.
Yes, you're right. I think the entire idea was in my head. It was just waiting to be transcribed onto my computer screen. But I think you can get lucky only the first time round because you're writing unself-consciously. You have no expectation of success. You have no yardstick against which you are judging yourself. My subsequent books, Six Suspects, The Accidental Apprentice, and The Girl with the Seven Lives, took a year and a half.
To develop, obviously, because, the process is different. And as you said, this one you had in your head. How did the film... Did you come about? Did you foresee that it would be made into a film?
No. So BBC asked me in an interview, Mr. Swarup, when you were writing this novel, could you visualize it as a film? And my answer was, I couldn't even visualize it as a book. I was a first-time author. Nobody in my family had written a novel. I had no idea how the publishing industry works. So I had no clue whether the book would even be published. But the interesting thing is I wrote this book in 2003. It went to the publisher in 2003. They liked it. But they said, this is a big book. This is a book which is going to make waves. So we are going to publish it with a lot of fanfare. And all our big books are already lined up for the next 2 years. So we will publish it in 2005. So I said, okay, I have no choice but to wait for 2 years for the book to be published. And I got a call from Film 4, from Tessa Ross of Film 4 in 2004, 1 year before the book had even been published. So my first question to her was, how do you know I've written something, because it's not been published yet? And she said, no, your publisher tips us off. They gave us a copy of the manuscript. We love your story. We think it will make a great film. And we have decided to option it.
Fantastic. It reads like a fairy story almost. And of course, the book had a huge a sort of wind in its sail after it was made as a film. And
well, even before the film came out, it had gone into 37 translations.
Wow.
It had become a bestseller in France, in Germany.
So a second life, as it were.
Yeah, but then after the movie came out, 8 more translations, 10 more translations have come through. So now it's in 47 translations.
Apart from the number of translations, the number of books that must have flowed off the
certainly, because especially in America, the book had not done too well because it was subsold. It was primarily sold to a UK publisher, and they had subsold in America. But once the film came out, it zoomed up even on the New York Times bestseller list.
I'm not surprised.
Because, see, the films are the ultimate mass medium. We all know that. Many more people watch films than read books, and that's a reality we have to accept.
And the title changed.
Yes. So when I was first told that your book will now be remarketed under the title of Slumdog Millionaire, I was very annoyed. I said, that's nonsense. My book was called Q&A, and the game show in my book is called Who Will Win a Billion? So if at all you have to change the title, make it Slumdog Billionaire, not Slumdog Millionaire.
Right.
And then they explained to me, they said, look, this is called the film book tie-in. It is marketed primarily at those who have no idea you exist or your book exists. They have just gone to a theater, they have watched a movie called Slumdog Millionaire, and they have walked into a bookstore and they have demanded Slumdog Millionaire. So naturally,
one of the things is, especially in this country, Slumdog is not understood as the underdog in that sense. And Slumdog as literally people thought it had to do with, they thought to all Indians.
No, absolutely. You probably know this, that Slum Dwellers Association of India actually filed a lawsuit against the film, claiming that by naming their film Slumdog Millionaire, they have labeled everybody living in a slum as a dog.
Wow. So that's a figure of speech being twisted in a different direction altogether.
They lost the case, but what they did was they went and bought 2 dogs and they named one dog Danny and one dog Simon. So they got their revenge.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Tell me, apart from the title, the other things that were, were done on the screenplay, which departed from the book. Some of it was for the sake of making it interesting cinema. Danny Boyle is a fantastic filmmaker, and he knew what kind of film he was going to make. When I read the script, however, I thought, for me, it wasn't as interesting as the book on the screenplay. But when I saw the film finally, the way it was edited and put together, which is, I think,
very slick package.
Danny Boyle's passion, if you like, and the way he used the talent and the way he told it, that human story came through in a very different way, and that
I agree.
accounts for its success, I believe.
I agree.
Well, what was your reaction as the original author?
So I would say the film basically follows the exact narrative structure of the book. What was the USP of the book? It was a new way of telling a story.
Yes.
Nobody had ever told a story through the medium of a quiz show.
Yes.
Where I'm revealing the private life of my protagonist through the public spectacle of this globally televised syndicated quiz show.
Right.
And the film follows exactly the same narrative structure. In what they changed were the stories. So I would say in 3 main instances, the film departs from the book.
Yes.
The first you have already alluded to. My lead character was called Ram Mohammed Thomas, because I wanted him to be a microcosm of every slum kid in India. By a name like Ram Mohammed Thomas, you don't really know. Is he from the north? Is he from the south? Is he Hindu? Is he Muslim? Is he Christian? What is he?
That's right.
He is India.
Yes.
But in the film, the multidimensionality of Ram Mohammed Thomas got reduced to the unidimensionality of Jamal Malik. So that's the one big change. The second big change was my book was about luck.
Yes.
And for me, luck is something that happens in everyday life, isn't it?
Yes.
The best student, just before examination gets pneumonia and flunks the exam. And we say that was bad luck. And walking down the street, you find a purse which has 10,000 rupees in it, and you say, wow, that's good luck. So that's something that happens in everyday life. But the film was about destiny. The opening frame itself says Jamal Malik is 1 step away from winning 20 million rupees. How did he do it? A, he's a genius. B, he cheated. C, he got lucky. And D, it is written. And it goes on to prove that it is written. Yeah. And, I don't believe in destiny, because what's the purpose of destiny unless you know it in advance? Because then only you can say that, that was told that this is what will happen and this is what happened.
Absolutely.
This way, destiny is just an ex post facto rationalization for whatever happened. If you passed, that was destiny. If you failed, that was destiny. So I don't believe in destiny.
Right.
So I think these were the 2 main, I would say, instances
which are fundamentally different from
the book. But look, the film stands on its own, because I think Danny Boyle put together a brilliant package.
Yes.
Where, everybody has small roles, but the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yes.
And I think I would give credit to A.R. Rahman's fantastic music,
Of
for
course.
which he rightly won an Oscar, and also the acting by the child actors. Two of them were from the slums themselves, who had no prior experience of acting.
Right.
But they really provide the soul of the film. And thirdly, Anthony Dodd Mantle's amazing cinematography.
Yes.
He captures the alleyways of Dharavi in a very kinetic way. You really feel it.
Very,
actually
very,
happened.
very, very, very kinetic, and the editing too. It's
Yes,
they
exactly.
put it together with the sound, with Rahman's music,
Correct.
with
And
editors coming together.
Pockett's sound design, I thought was really.
I think also Dev Patel had a certain innocence, I think,
Yes.
which people connected with,
Correct.
and which was important for the central character. All of which led to a tremendous success for the movie, and which was again had a force multiplier impact after the Oscars.
Absolutely. I mean, it won everything. It won everything inside. It won the Golden Globes, it won the BAFTAs, and then it cleaned up at the Oscars.
Yes, so that was just at the end of a whole
Correct.
lot of other things that it was picked up.
In total, it has won more than 78 awards.
78, my God, must have felt really good. What was your experience at these award ceremonies, and particularly the Oscars? Like, tell us about it.
So they invited me to the BAFTAs, they invited me to the Golden Globe, but as a serving diplomat, I just couldn't tell
Right.
my government I'm jetting off to London or to Los Angeles for these things.
Right.
But when the Oscars were happening, Danny Boyle was very keen that the entire cast and crew, and including the writer, should be united, because
Yes.
it was the last party, so to speak.
Right.
Right. There's nothing beyond the Oscars.
Yes.
It's the last thing. So he was keen that I should go, and I was able to get permission from my government, and I went to the Oscar. And the Oscars ceremony, before you go for it, it comes with a lot of do's and don'ts. A whole checklist of, you cannot bring a recording equipment, you cannot be dressed shabbily, you have to be dressed preferably in black tie,
Formally. Yeah.
things like this, etc. So I decided not to go with my cell phone or anything. I just went with a copy of my book.
Yeah.
Because I said, this is the last time I'm meeting everybody, Anil Kapoor and Dev
Getting
Patel.
signatures or whatever.
I'll get everybody to sign on to the copy of my book, and I managed to do that. But the Oscar ceremony was very, very interesting. What I loved about the Oscar was it was very democratic. I mean, in India, a top Bollywood superstar, you won't be allowed to come within 10 feet of them, because their bodyguard, their handlers will always be around, and they will prevent you from really coming too close to them. But the Oscar, once you cross the red carpet, then you are a guest. Brad Pitt is a guest. There is no distinction. There are no
Right.
bouncers and bodyguards and sundry people floating around trying to prevent people from mingling with each other. It has a total of just 3,000 guests, and everybody is important in their eyes. So I was able to meet everybody. The most interesting thing happened after the Oscar was over, because everybody was going for the governor's ball, which was hosted by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was the
Governor of
then governor of California.
Yeah.
I was not going for the governor's ball because my wife Aparna, who had accompanied me to Los Angeles, was waiting for me at the after party at the Sunset Boulevard.
Right.
So I wanted to go and join her, and there was nobody to guide you as to where to go, where to find the parking, etc. Because it's like once the film has ended, they take you out from the Patli Gali. It's that kind of
Find your way.
You find your way. So I blundered, left and right, and found myself in Jennifer Aniston's makeup room. Entirely by mistake.
That's crazy.
She was just taking off her makeup.
Oh, she was there.
She was there, of course she was there.
You recognize her without makeup?
I recognize her without makeup, and I think most Hollywood stars look exactly as they do on screen.
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't think they believe into.
They transform themselves beyond the point, unless the role requires it.
That's right. And I was in my black bangala, and the only thing I had with me was my copy of Slumdog Millionaire. And she looked at me, and she looked at the copy in my hands, and she says, "So you are the man?" And I said, "Yes, I am the man."
The man behind 8 Oscars in a manner of speaking.
And then, of course, we had a 10-minute conversation. And what I loved about that Oscar thing was that for the first time, India arrived in the global consciousness on the world's biggest entertainment stage.
Yeah.
Because before this, people dismissed Bollywood as, this is something for the Indian diaspora only. This was the first mainstream film from India which captured a global audience. And to win 8 Oscars and to win against the competition, like The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Milk, The Dark Knight, these were the kinds of films.
Mega films.
And this was a tiny film made on a $15 million budget
And in a very
with
different
unknown
way.
actors, with an unknown music director in the West at that point in time, for it to make the kind of waves it did. It really gladdened the heart that India has finally arrived on the world's greatest entertainment stage.
After that, some of your other novels have also been adapted into
Yes.
web series or are about to be.
Yes. So the second novel was called Six Suspects, and that has been adapted into The Great Indian Murder, which is available on Disney Hotstar. I do not know whether second season 2 is coming or not because Disney, as you know, has just been purchased by Geo.
Yes.
So I do not know whether there'll be a second season or not. But certainly, Tigmanshu Dhulia did a fantastic job in converting a very complex novel into a very enjoyable, 9-part web series.
Okay.
So that's the second book.
Right.
The third book is called The Accidental Apprentice. That is also being made into a film by the same people who produced The Great Indian Murder. So I'm excited about that. As we speak, the script has been written and they're shopping it around to possible directors who might direct it.
Okay.
And for the latest book, the interesting thing is, Siddharth, there's a lot of interest, not only from Bollywood, but also from Hollywood.
Oh.
So a lot of people, they feel it's very cinematic, it would make a great film, especially because it's a very woman-centric film,
Yes. That puts you in a league of authors or writers with, mega blockbusters on a global stage. One would imagine you would have a home in Hollywood.
No.
Not just in Greater Noida.
The mega bucks are made by the film people, not by the book people.
But you can negotiate, I'm sure. I'm sure you have good people to negotiate on your
Look, at the end of the day, for me, what's important is that my story is reaching a much wider audience.
Of course.
For me, that is what matters.
Yes.
That as a result of the book transitioning into a film, it reaches a much more diverse and much wider audience and a global audience also. And that's really what's important for a writer, to have readers writing to you from Germany, from Argentina, from Mexico, from Thailand. That's really what makes your day. To see that a story which you sort of thought of in your head is now inside the head of your readers who are all across the world.
Also, what you write about is mainly about India.
Yes.
But you've been an international diplomat. You've traveled all over the world. You've had postings in different continents.
4 different continents.
In 4 different continents. But you haven't thought of writing something over there apart from an indirect influence on your books?
So basically, the latest launch of the book was in Mumbai. Meera Kapoor, who, as you know, is Shahid Kapoor's wife and an entrepreneur herself from Delhi, she is the one who launched the book. And she was very insistent that, Mr. Swarup, we would like you to write a spy novel, based on your experiences as a diplomat, which would traverse the globe. And I told her, I said, yeah, well, I can certainly consider it. But as of now, my focus has been on India because, you see, what I call my books, I don't call my books mere thrillers, which a spy novel generally is. I call my books social thrillers.
Yes.
So in the sense that, you get a very thrilling, engaging narrative, which can keep you hooked, but you also get a lot of social commentary.
Yes.
You get to ponder on some of the issues confronting our country, for instance. So I always, have maintained that I want my books to have a conscience.
Yes.
And that conscience can only come from when you think deeply about social issues, what's confronting, what has gone wrong, what can be fixed, So unless you have that conscience that, what's happening around us needs to be fixed, you will not write about it.
Tell us a little bit about that, starting with, at one stage I know, when I was young, to join the Indian Foreign Service was to be able to see the world.
Yes.
Which has changed in recent years. But that impulse to, to see and experience the world was an important one.
Yes,
in your case, what was it?
It was exactly that because, you see, I joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1986.
Yes.
Now, India in 1986 was a closed economy.
Yes.
Our economic liberalization had not happened.
Right.
Foreign goods were very scarcely available in India, even in Delhi. I remember when I was studying in Delhi in St. Columba's school, my uncle with whom I was living, he used to go to auctions by foreign embassies and pick up books by, in Spanish and things like that, saying, no, but this is foreign. The foreign had such a charm. It was seen as so exotic. People were dying to get their hands on anything which had the foreign label attached to it.
It was absolutely the case.
Exactly.
Yeah, this whole craze for
correct.
foreign things because you didn't have access to them.
Exactly. So in 1986, the kind of India that we had at that time, foreign had a certain charm and a certain exoticness to it, which was also one of the motivating factors for me to join the Indian Foreign Service.
Yeah.
Not just to see the world. I wanted to experience the world because, you see, the difference between a tourist who goes to a country for a week or 10 days, you get a very surface impression of that country.
Right.
But as a diplomat, you are posted for 3 years or 4 years in that country.
Right.
And that allows you to have a much deeper understanding of the DNA of that country, of its people, what makes them tick, so to speak. And you come back with a much more nuanced understanding of the world. You also develop a comparative scale. Okay, this is where India has done better. This is where India could do better.
Yes, absolutely. And you're trying to advance the interests of your country.
Absolutely. In fact, now one of the tasks of Indian diplomats posted abroad is to learn from best practices wherever they are posted and send them back to India for possible,
Integration.
adaptation and integration.
Yeah, that's right. How many languages do you speak, incidentally?
No, so every Indian diplomat is supposed to learn one foreign language, and my foreign language happens to be Turkish.
Turkish. All right. So,
I was just the second Indian diplomat to be sent to Ankara to learn the language.
oh, is that right? And that was one of your postings.
That was my first.
Tells me about some of your interesting postings. I'm sure people would love to hear.
So all my postings have been interesting because I have worked with a very simple philosophy that a posting is made not just by the quality of the city, but by the quality of the conversations you can have in that city. So if you are having good conversations, even if you are in Kabul and there are bombs, blasts going all around you, it couldn't be a good posting because you are learning so much.
Incidentally, have you been in Kabul?
I've been in Kabul. I've been with Prime Minister Modi twice to Kabul, in fact.
Wow.
Yes, even for the inauguration of the Parliament building in Kabul, for the inauguration of the Salma Dam. Yes, and it's a remarkable country. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we have given a lot of assistance to the people of Afghanistan. And I think that is what stands us in good stead, regardless of the change in regime.
Right.
People of Afghanistan know that India is a true friend, which has stood by them, in good times and bad.
Yeah.
So my postings after Turkey were, I came back to Delhi. Then I went to Washington, D.C. as the special assistant to the ambassador, got the opportunity of working with two outstanding statesmen, Ambassador Siddhartha Basu and Ambassador Naresh Chandra. From Washington, D.C., I went to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, which was also a very interesting posting. From Ethiopia, I went to London as the political counselor, and that's where I wrote Q&A, which became Slumdog Millionaire. From London, I came back to Delhi again, became director in charge of Pakistan, then director in charge of the Office of the Minister of External Affairs, worked very closely with Mr. Natwar Singh, who was then the External Affairs Minister. From Delhi, then I went to Pretoria, South Africa as Deputy High Commissioner. From there, I went to Osaka, Kobe, Japan as Consul General of India. From there, came back to Delhi, became the official spokesperson. Then went as High Commissioner of India to Canada, supervised that infamous trip of Justin Trudeau to India in 2018. And then came back to Delhi again as Secretary West, in charge of relations with Europe, with Central Asia, with the United Nations system.
Yes.
Protocol, everything was under me. But that was the pandemic period, very little travel. And we were doing mostly online meetings, etc. And then I retired from the Foreign Service in June 2021.
A stellar career. An absolutely stellar career and really very interesting. And I'm going to come back to something which is central to Quizzitok in a sense, which is, apart from your storytelling, the facility with the language, possibly more than one language. I'm sure you speak Hindi.
English,
And of course,
Hindi,
there's
a little bit of Japanese, and of course, a little bit of
Japanese in turn. But using language simply with a certain clarity and understanding is one of the things that you've done. Where did that come from?
So that came from my training as a diplomat. Because you see, we diplomats, we primarily deal with words. And we are told to evaluate and use words very carefully because one wrong word can send diplomatic relations with another country into a tailspin. Just one wrong word.
Yes.
And that's why, our choice of words has to be very careful, has to be very deliberate. And I think that comes in handy when you decide to use that analytical skill in things beyond your political reporting. So when you're trying your hand at fiction or non-fiction, whatever, I think that felicity with language, with words, comes in handy.
Because you've had a rich career as a diplomat, could you share some of the key lessons you've learned through your experiences in diplomacy and how those may have introduced your writing?
Well, there are a lot of misconceptions about diplomacy. Many people think that these diplomats are, elites who are just roaming the cocktail circuit, kissing the hands of queens and princesses and, generally having a great time.
I'm sure there's that too.
No, I don't think so because, one comic even in fact remarked that diplomacy is 30% alcohol and 70% protocol, which is not the case at all. I think diplomacy is very hard work because diplomacy is about building bridges. It's about connecting people. It's about making your own point of view heard and understood better across the world. And I think that's what diplomats are trained to do. So, of course, I did all that. But also diplomats are now have become experts at humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, for instance.
Okay.
In my very first posting in Turkey, I was sent off to the border of Turkey, Syria and Iraq to rescue the Indians who were fleeing the First Gulf War.
Oh, yeah, I remember there was a huge sort of exodus that was required.
Right. And I was there at the border and these are millionaires, Indian millionaires who are fleeing the Gulf War, coming with just a suitcase on their heads, and they had nothing left because the war was so fierce, and they were in
Yes.
danger of losing their life, and they just had to flee. So that was my first experience of dealing with the Indian diaspora in my very first posting in Turkey, and in my posting in Addis Ababa. Another very interesting thing happened. The Ethiopia-Eritrea war broke out. So at that time, we had about 400 Indian professors working for the Eritrean government in Asmara, the capital,
Right.
teaching in their universities. So the ambassador said, Vikas, I think you should go and check on the welfare of these people. I said, so absolutely fine. By that time, Ethiopia had already closed all direct air links between Ethiopia and Eritrea. So I had to fly via Djibouti. So my ticket was Addis Ababa, Djibouti, Djibouti, Eritrea, Djibouti, Asmara. The day I landed in Djibouti, that very day, the Ethiopian Air Force went and strafed Asmara airport.
Woof.
And the Indian professors were living right next to the airport, all their window panes shattered. And then they say, okay, what is the government of India doing to rescue us? So the ambassador's instructions change. You are no longer going to ascertain the welfare of the Indian community. You have to go and airlift them, bring them out of Asmara.
Rescue them.
I said, fine. When is the Air India plane coming? There is no Air India plane available. Go and find a plane. So imagine, I'm an Indian diplomat, and I was just going to check on the Indian community in Asmara. I didn't have more than $10 or $15 in my pocket. And now I've been asked to hire a plane from anywhere in Djibouti, take it to Asmara, and rescue the Indians there. So that involved negotiating with a bunch of Somalian pirates who ran a very dodgy airline with Russian pilots and Antonovs and Tupolev aircraft, and they demanded $250,000 to be paid for them, to be paid to them on the tarmac and things like that. I mean, there's lots of stuff which I cannot reveal officially, but all I can say is it had all the elements of a Tom Clancy thriller.
I can see that. And I think it's the makings of another web series or novel or whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah, so it requires guts too.
Yes, absolutely. I don't forget, many Indian diplomats have lost their lives, including in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
To bomb blasts and terrorism. We lost a consul lost his life in Birmingham. The consul general in Birmingham lost his life. So diplomacy is serious business, and it can have very serious consequences.
Negotiating with pirates on the one hand, and things getting strafed, the war, the Gulf War at that, and having to work and function within that.
Correct.
It just shows what diplomats have to deal with.
Correct. Plus, you see, now the world has become so interconnected.
Yes.
That no one nation can solve all the problems on its own. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic was the perfect example of that. A virus that began in Wuhan in China eventually locked down the entire world.
Yes.
And the only way to tackle that was for the entire world to come together, for the WHO to issue strict guidelines, which every country in the world was obliged to implement. Because without that, it's just not possible. International terrorism cannot be stopped by one country. It has to be stopped by all countries working together. And the biggest threat of our time, climate change. If we are on a catastrophic path to more than 2 degrees centigrade global warming, I mean, that will be the end of life as we know it on Earth. And that can only be prevented if all nations of the world come together, agree on binding commitments, to do their own bit to prevent or slow down at least the speed of climate change.
That brings me to another aspect that I want to discuss with you today before we wind up. You've been official spokesperson of the government of India to the rest of the world through the External Affairs Ministry. So information, the way it's being handled now in today's world, the way it has to be regarded, the way it has to be diffused, as it were, the way it has to be received, we have to become very vigilant in many ways. The ordinary citizen has to be very vigilant. I think even children, young people, have to become extra sharp to be able to tell fact from fiction. So in this digital age, I'd love to know your views about how are we supposed to navigate things.
Yep. No, absolutely. That's a very important point, Siddhartha, that you have raised, because the entire contour of diplomacy has changed in the digital age.
Yes.
In the past, in the 1980s and 90s, diplomacy was about, giving a cyclo-style press note to the media and to the journalist, and they could just take elements from there and
a sort of press release, they would call it.
Exactly. A one-way communication, a press release. Now, in the age of Twitter and WhatsApp and social media, it's no longer possible, because diplomacy is now being conducted on the fly. A single tweet from Donald Trump can, tell a country that tariffs are being imposed on it, for instance, when it has to react very fast. So diplomacy is now happening in real time. It's no longer happening behind closed doors within an elite group of diplomats talking to each other. The whole world is talking to each other now.
Yes.
And diplomats have to be very agile, they have to be very focused, and to have to be very responsive in reacting to real life events and coming out with their own narrative. So that has changed diplomacy. Of course, it has also made it very difficult to compress a very complex issue into a 240 character tweet.
Totally.
Because diplomacy is about nuance, and sometimes it's very difficult to capture the right nuance in a short tweet. But unfortunately, in the age we are living in, with people having limited attention spans, it's all about the bite now. And you have to farm out the right bite to capture what you're trying to say. So that's very important. And the other thing is combating misinformation. The graduates, I always say this, that the biggest danger to the world today is not from terrorists. It's from the graduates from the university of WhatsApp. Because these are people who are ready to believe every nonsensical thing that is circulated to them on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And before you know it, they have circulated it to 10 other people. And before you know it, they have circulated it to 50 other people. And, the complete piece of fakery or misinformation is seen as the gospel truth by many people in the world.
Yeah, people believe what they want to believe, not the truth.
Exactly.
The truth has taken a backseat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's very important to sift fact from fiction. Fact checking is very, very important in today's world. And we as diplomats are combating misinformation all the time, because let's not forget, India is surrounded by hostile countries as well, whose main job is to put out misinformation about what India is doing, about India's external relations, etc. And we have to be very, very vigilant in squashing those rumors, squashing those attempts to intimidate people by a fake piece of information, and to ensure that our bilateral partners remain on the same page with us.
Very challenging for diplomats, but also for the ordinary citizen, my God, to be able to tell, including a government narrative, they have to look at it skeptically. And skepticism is something that I'm going to come to next. It's much tougher in today's world for a child to grow up than it was during my time, your time, and earlier generations. Because what is a child to make out of this tornado of information? They're dealing with a world, not only challenges of climate change, of, sort of the globally shifting sort of, crises that are engulfing us as a way. There's this information Niagara, which is sort of, drowning everybody. How are they supposed to cope with it? How are they supposed to be able to get to the truth of matters? How are they supposed to cull knowledge from it, and from that to hopefully not only enrich their understanding, to equip themselves to deal with the world and hopefully make it a better world than the one that they're inheriting?
This is the central question of our time, Siddharth. You have hit the nail on the head. My new novel, which you have read, opens with the line, "The most valuable thing in the world is not money, it is attention." And that's the world we are living in.
Yes.
The thing which is most in short supply is attention.
Yes.
Because there is an overload of information now.
Yes.
What is missing is attention. How do you focus on the information that you need? Because you are surrounded by, not just information, but misinformation as well. So that's why I think fact-checking becomes very, very important. And I think also we need a digital detox. Most of the fake information that you're seeing floating around is coming from social media.
Yes.
And that's why, if you would have read, very recently, Australia is coming out with a proposal that people below 16 years old, children below 16 years old, will not have access to social media. I don't know whether they'll be able to do it, whether they can police this, whether they can ban this, but certainly that's a step in the right direction, I think, because, social media is what is corrupting our youngsters, giving them access to all kinds of wrong information, and maybe taking them into very dark and devious ways as well. So I think something needs to be done to combat misinformation on social media. I think that's very important, because right now, social media companies are saying, we are not responsible for the content on our platform. Unlike a newspaper is held liable for the content that they publish, and they can be sued for libel. But social media company says, we have nothing to do.
We are just aggregators.
We are just
We just
aggregators.
carry-
People are posting whatever they want. And even when you point out that this is patently false, it takes days for that particular piece of information to be taken down. So I think, these are issues that we all need to take a very hard look at. There are no easy solutions.
Yeah. Bans, I don't know to what extent they will work, because I think that horse is bolted.
Yes, I also agree.
It's how do you switch off the internet and for a whole generation?
No,
of
not.
people?
I think access to certain social media platforms. I think that's what probably
To the extent, yes, to the extent to which they can be controlled.
I also think that it's really impossible to police.
I personally believe it's also equipping people to know how to be able to tell
Exactly.
truth from mistruth, right information from wrong information.
Right.
And for that, I believe foundational knowledge is very important.
Absolutely, and that's why you have to catch them young. If at the school level itself, we teach children, what is right and what is wrong, how to spot fake information, I think it will stand them in very good stead because, as you rightly said, the horse is already bolted. Children at a very young age are now exposed to social media, exposed to all kinds of information, and they do not know what to believe and what not to believe. So if the schools can equip them with the tools that they need to separate fact from fiction, to separate the signal from the noise, as it were, I think that will be a huge service to all of us because they will grow up as responsible adults.
I think it's incumbent on their teachers, certainly, the schools, the educational institutions, but also the homes, the families, the society has to start valuing that and has to be made to value the truth. Our country's motto is Satyameva Jayate, not Asatyameva Jayate.
And I think one of the best tools that can aid us in this endeavor is quizzing. If we expose kids at a very young age to quizzing was the ultimate fact checker. As you as a quizzer, me as a quizzer, whenever we read something, we used to check it. That is this true? Is this indeed the highest mountain in the world or not?
Yes. And know where to look for it,
And
for the information.
Exactly.
Verified information to tell what is true. I was going to come to that. The key things are curiosity,
Yes.
because I think that is the seed of the search for all knowledge
Absolutely.
through human history.
Correct.
Skepticism, to be able to question things, to be able to ask the right questions is very important. And to me, it's always, you just said I'm a quizzer. I've never been a quizzer, Vikas.
Oh,
Which
yes, you were a theater guy.
yes, that's right. That was my background, and I came into quizzing really for the first time as a quizmaster on Quiz Time. This was 1985, and that was because of my theater background and general, as a communicator of my career. And I've approached it in that way. But what I've tried to keep central is I've never been interested in trivia, meaning, what should I put it as side information. I don't like the term. It may mean different things in different cultures and countries. But for me, it's always been information or knowledge that has a certain value, that gives you a perspective on dimensions of a thing you may or may not be aware of, but which is also central to how we have to understand things. And I think that some people call it general knowledge, general awareness. I'm expanding that to foundational awareness is important. And that is one aspect which you've spoken about, and the other one is quizzing. To be able to actually keep asking questions, know how to find out the truth is terribly important.
Yes.
Yeah, and to recollect. And you've been an active quizzer. And
Absolutely. In fact, one of the characters in my book Q&A, Ram Mohammed Thomas, he says, a quiz is not so much a test of your knowledge, but a test of your memory.
yes, because your ready recollection
Exactly.
is one aspect of quizzing which you don't. And to test yourself, have I understood it?
Correct.
Or somebody else tests you. So in that sense, the quizzing activity itself, whether it's general knowledge or anything else, is something which is, I think, a very useful learning mechanism.
I always call them the 3 C's. First C, you have already said, curiosity. You see, the 21st century is the century of innovation. And innovation is only possible by people looking at the world through fresh eyes and, thinking of
Yes.
things which do not exist yet.
Right.
And curiosity is the foundation of any invention, of any innovation.
That's right.
Without curiosity, if you do not think of a possibility of what can be changed, you will not change it.
Yeah.
So that's curiosity. The second is comprehensiveness. Now, you see, quizzing is also about being a know-it-all. Because you cannot be a quizmaster, a quizzer just by knowing history or just by knowing geography.
That's right.
You have to also know science, you have to know technology, you have to know countries and capitals, you have to even know pop culture.
Yes.
Current day culture,
very important.
movies, books, all these things you have to know. So you have to become a know-it-all. It's the comprehensiveness of it. And third, also you have alluded to the challenge.
Yes.
That you are challenging, not only you're challenging others, that I know more than you, you're also challenging yourself.
Very important.
And that is why I believe if you are once a quizzer, always a quizzer, it is the perfect thing to become a lifelong learner.
Yes.
Because once you are a quizzer and you have these 3 things, curiosity, comprehensiveness, and the sense of challenge. You will always want to do that and always find out new things about the world, because the world is constantly evolving, the world is constantly changing, new facts are coming out, which you did not know before, and you want to keep up pace, even though you're no longer participating in Mastermind or Kaun Banega Crorepati. But just, it makes you feel good that I know this fact.
I think what you've said about lifelong learning is something everybody has to take a leaf out of that book, and to expand their interests and awareness through reading, through life itself, from observation, which has been central to your books, to be able to not only put it to good use, but to enrich their own lives, their own minds in as many ways as possible. Before I end this chat, I'm going to ask you something. The mascot for our Knowledge Bee books is a bee called Buzzy. Okay. And my last question to you is, what's the buzz? In your life, in what you see happening around the world, what's your reading?
Right.
If I were to ask you, Vikas, what's the buzz?
So the buzz right now is Donald Trump.
Yes.
I mean, he has been elected once again, the 47th president of the United States. And I think, his vision of the world, his vision for America, and this entire, populist movement, which is taking over the world, I think is going to define politics for a long time. The second buzz is going to be the US-China rivalry. And I think that's going to shape global alliances, who aligns with China, who aligns with the West. I think that's going to be very, very interesting. So these are the two on the political and the geopolitical side. On the economic side, I think the buzz is artificial intelligence. That is going to be the single biggest disruptor in our lifetimes. I was reading a book by Ray Kurzweil, and he says that artificial general intelligence, which, as you know, is the holy grail of artificial intelligence, because that is the super intelligent robot that Hollywood apocalyptic movies are made of, that will become a reality. But yesterday, Sam Altman has said that AGI is coming as early as 2025. And once that happens, that will be a game changer. By one estimate, 40% of jobs worldwide are going to be impacted by AI in some form or the other. 300 million jobs will be lost. Of course, maybe 500, 600 million jobs will be created. But the transition from the old economy to this new economy, I think, will be a big challenge for politicians all across the world.
Our ability to ride change and to stay on top of it is going to be more challenging than ever before. Hopefully exciting and interesting. Last question on the personal side, on your writing side. What's the buzz there?
Yes, so the buzz there is not so, vibrant at the current moment, because for me, this is the downtime. My latest book is done. I'm doing a lot of promotion, etc. And I think you need to recharge your batteries, after. It's a very exhausting thing. Writing is a very solitary process, as you know. You lock yourself in a room, you invent a world in your head, and you write from that perspective. And it drains you also, especially when you're writing very emotionally wrenching narratives.
Yes.
So it drains you, and you need to recharge. So I'm currently recharging my batteries. This particular session with you on Quizzitok has been a great booster to my emotional and battery health. And I hope to get back into action early next year. Lots of ideas in my head, not just on fiction, but also about geopolitics, which is also one of my great loves.
It's been a fascinating chat. We wish you all the best for not only the fate of the books you've already written, but the new ones, and perhaps it'll be spread on various platforms, on various media. Vikas, thank you so much for joining us on Quizzitok. Your story, your insights, your experiences, it's been really inspiring listening to them. To our listeners, keep learning, stay curious, and remember that the world is a treasure trove of knowledge and experiences. Join us next time as we continue to explore the power of knowledge with another inspiring guest like Vikas Swarup. Until then, happy quizzing and keep your curiosity alive.